And because we look healthy, there's a lot of people who have family members, husbands, wives, daughters, sons that don't believe them. And that is a particular kind of hell that I have not had to live through. But I completely empathize, sympathize, and want to give everybody that has that going on with a POTS diagnosis, I just want to give them a hug because this is hard.
It's all in your head. You don't look sick. Your tests are normal. It's probably anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Have you heard these words from physicians, family, and friends? If you're someone who has been struggling and swirling through the revolving door of healthcare to find answers about your health, or if you know someone who is going through this experience, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast with Laura Nozica, a show dedicated to exploring the challenges of living with undiagnosed or rare medical conditions. This podcast explores both sides of the bedside. We will be speaking with patients who have had challenges with finding a diagnosis, along with experts in the field. I'm your host, Laura Nozica. Please note I am not a medical professional, nor am I affiliated with any healthcare, pharmaceutical, or device company. I am an entrepreneur, and I am an independent market researcher focused on helping healthcare organizations better understand the patient perspective. The podcast is not meant to offer medical advice, but to merely share the stories and perspectives of podcast guests. Hello, and welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. I'm your host, Laura Nozica, and I am here today with my guest, Laura Roskelly, and she's going to talk with us about her journey today with a whole variety of different kinds of symptoms that she's experiencing for a very long time. I think she said 9 years this has been going on. And we'll learn more about her. But Laura, welcome to the podcast. And I just have to kick this off saying right away, your tiki collection behind you is amazing. I'm over the moon looking at these tikis because I'm all about the mid-century tiki shag kind of era. And those are some fabulous tikis that you've got back there. Where do you get them from?
Oh my gosh, my favorite thing to do is thrift stores. That's probably the only hobby that I have. I scour Facebook Marketplace, yard sales, anywhere I can pick up a vintage treasure, I'm on the hunt.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks for sharing that with us. I appreciate it. So tell me a little bit about you.
I live in Southwest Florida, kind of a small town. I live with my husband, who is retired. I work in real estate, basically in support of my real estate team that is up in Maryland. My daughter runs that business now. And we have two precious little long-haired chihuahuas that are our children and one fat cat who just kind of lays around. But I work from home. I'm very fortunate that way, considering everything that I've got going on. And I have a super supportive husband who not only believes and has always believed in my symptoms, but is there to support me in any way possible. And I feel bad for people that don't have that because he really is my lifeline.
Well, he sounds like a keeper. Not everyone gets that.
35 years. Yeah, I'm going to hang in there.
You're definitely staying busy, but you're also managing through these symptoms that you've had for quite a while. So if you could, Laura, kick us off with where your journey started, how long ago, and what kind of symptoms you might have been experiencing at the time.
My journey with this surprisingly started with pain in my thigh muscles, the top of my legs. I was just very uncomfortable. It got to the point, I was in my 40s, I think, when that first started. And it kind of progressed. So all the muscles below my waist got sore and my joints are super sore. And I'm going to the doctor, the rheumatologist. They're like, oh, you have a little bit of arthritis. And I'm thinking, there's nothing a little bit about this. This is extremely painful, life-altering painful. And when I would sit down even for a few minutes, I'd go to stand up and my legs just wouldn't listen to me. They didn't want to move. And I would have to stand there for a good minute or two, which is kind of uncomfortable, especially if you're in a restaurant or something, and wait for my legs to kind of obey their commands. It's like my brain and my legs weren't talking. And that was diagnosed as a little bit of arthritis. And I kind of went away defeated thinking, wow, if this is arthritis, that's really, really bad. I was in an auto accident when I was 50. I was stopped at a red light and a truck towing a boat ran into me without ever slowing down.
Mm.
And then tried to run and then got in the passenger seat and said, I'm not the driver. It was a whole very dramatic event. And after that, I was treated for a coup contra coup brain injury.
What is that called?
Coup contra coup. It's French. COUPS. Contra, CONTRA, coup, COUPS.
How would you describe that?
I would describe it as my different brain in the same body. I lost a lot of my executive skills, which were super important to my job. I didn't have a day timer. I knew all my clients' names. I knew all my appointment times in my head. And I had a really beautiful brain, but I'd had it my whole life. So I didn't know it was different. People had told me, you're super smart, you're this and you're that, but it was just my brain. And I don't know another way to describe it. And prior to the accident, I was sorting through a 60-page real estate contract, which was something I did all the time. I freaked them my way. It was very regimented and I couldn't make sense of it. I'm looking and the pages are numbered at the bottom and I still couldn't make sense of it. I had a lot of eye issues and I'm a pretty articulate human and I was going to my doctor going, something's wrong with my eyes. I couldn't describe it. And it turned out that I had 8 very different diagnoses, including double vision. I did 50 sessions of vision therapy with a specialist and tamed it, but it's always going to be something that lives with me. It causes fatigue because I think my neuro-ophthalmologist said 80% of your brain is your vision, processing your vision. And mine just doesn't have the great connect. So I've gotten that fatigue to start with.
If I could ask, what kind of eye symptoms were you having?
One of the main things was I was not able to focus properly on distance. So my eyes were not converging. It's called some convergence insufficiency. And my eyes were not doing what they were supposed to do to come together and make one picture out of each side of the eye.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I can't remember. They're all very technical diagnoses. Double vision and convergence insufficiency are the 2 that are coming to mind now. But there were 6 others. And I was just lucky enough to fall in with a great neuro-ophthalmologist at Johns Hopkins, Baltimore, who then hooked me up with a therapist. There's very few of them, but I was in the Baltimore, D.C. area at that time. And I was able to see Dr. Applebaum, who was amazing with any kind of vision issues resulting from a concussion. So I got better enough that I could drive and do things that normal people do. But I wasn't getting better. I went to the Johns Hopkins Brain Injury Clinic. I went through outpatient therapy groups and physical therapy and just all kinds of things because I was like, I can't sort a contract. This is my job. I need to do this. I just had a drive to get back to who I was before. And it became apparent after a couple of years that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to be who I was before. So I basically had to readjust to this new disorganized, probably nicer person brain because I didn't have the regimented get this done, do this.
Yeah.
More, okay, we have to slow down. We have to think about this. And it was a terrible adjustment, but I did it. But I had these lingering symptoms and some of them I'd had off and on my entire life, but they were every day now. And then it just became nonstop. And I'm going to the doctors and I'm saying, listen, a little arthritis does not explain my joint pain. A little anything doesn't describe this. There are days where I am completely incapacitated. I cannot move. It feels like you have the flu. So every kind of flu symptom. I'm weird in that through all of this, I never had headaches as a symptom, but that's very common. So I kept going to the doctor and saying, my legs hurt a lot. I'm extremely fatigued. I feel like my muscles have been hit with a meat tenderizer.
Wow.
It's just the worst feeling. It almost feels like you're infected. And I would describe to the doctors, it feels like my muscles are shrink wrapped to my bones. And they'd go, oh, that is really weird. I was telling them repeatedly, I stand up and I feel like I'm going to pass out. I'm nauseous. At one point, I think I lost 40 pounds not trying. I just couldn't tolerate any kind of food. I was waking up with these weird sweats, my chest, the inside of my elbows, just like soaking wet every night. and I'm done with menopause. I'm way past the menopause stage.
I was going to ask how many physicians maybe pawned it off on menopause, because I'm right there. So I get the
None of them, when this started, one of the first things they did was test to see if I was still in menopause. And there's some test they can do that conclusively says you have completed your menopause. And I had that, so they knew. But there was no way to describe to the doctors other than I feel like I have the flu every day. It's that bad. Picture how sick you are when you have the flu, and that's every single day.
from a fatigue standpoint, or
From every muscle in your body aching, intense. You cannot fight it. Fatigue. Like you cannot get up to get yourself a glass of water. Literally, like you have the flu, and think about everything that entails. You can't get out of bed. You can't really care for yourself. But it was every day now. And I told my husband, I said, I find myself laying down all the time, and I feel like I'm going to lay down and I'm not going to be able to get back up. I'll just be too weak. And I felt that it was from the concussion, but I thought there was something else going on as well. But I went to a lot of medical facilities, upwards of 25 doctors,
oh gosh,
reading my case.
what kind of doctors, Laura, did you see or were you seeing?
Primary care, of course. They sent me to rheumatologist. They sent me to a gastroenterologist, lots of tests for that. Neuromuscular doctor, a neurologist. And I think that's pretty much where it ended, because they all said, all your tests are normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And at one point I changed doctors, and it never even in a million years occurred to me that they did not think my issues were legitimate. Like that would never have been a consideration for me. I just thought they weren't being very helpful. And the doctor basically let me know that it had been noted in my file that these symptoms were psychological. So I'm still adjusting to being this new human.
Sorry, Laura, which kind of doctor was assuming that they were more
My primary care. At least my primary care. I don't know how much further it went since then, because you don't get to see the doctor's notes in your file. Even if you request your whole file, that information is kept confidential. So at least one doctor, my primary care, had branded me as a psych case. And I'm going through this brain injury thing and learning how to be this new, calmer, rational person that can't remember anything, can't sort anything, can't sequence in any way. So I'm going through that transition, and I'm going through these other symptoms popping up, and they told me it was in my head. And after I've been told that, directly or indirectly by several doctors, by telling me all my tests were normal and they weren't finding anything wrong with me, I started to really doubt myself, because I'm like here in this new brain. I'm trying out this new brain that's way less efficient than the one that I had before. And maybe I am. I mean, it really got to the point where I thought, oh my God, am I doing this to myself? And I remember telling a doctor at one point, and I don't remember which it was, I said, I am not, anxiety was the big thing they wrote it down to. So they didn't all say psychological issues, but they said anxiety. And I said, well, I'm really anxious because I'm sick all the time. I'm not sick because I'm anxious. That fell on deaf ears. So I stopped complaining. It was probably 6 years of constant research, going to doctors over and over again and telling them how very sick I was. And I don't look particularly sick, I don't think. And I walk in there on my 2 legs and, yes, it hurts, but I'm there. But I stopped complaining, and I would cry, and I would sit at home and I would think, I'm mentally not. It was a distinct before and after. I'm not mentally who I was. I'm not physically who I was. And during this almost a decade, I'm dealing with aging. This is from 50 to 60 or 50 to 59, almost 60. And when it got really bad this summer, I had never shared specific in-depth details about my illness with my new primary care provider in Florida, because I knew I was going to get the same answer. I told her I was in immense pain. She'd give me some Balta or, some kind of medicine.
Laura, you said you were second guessing yourself. So how did that work on you as you're a smart lady and you're doing research and now you're questioning yourself? So how is that affecting you now at that point?
When somebody tells you you're crazy and they're kind of in a position of authority, I think pre-brain injury, I probably would have fought a lot harder and said, oh, don't even go there. It's just not going to happen. But I was really super insecure at that time because my brain wasn't working like it used to. And I thought, oh gosh, what if maybe there's a circuit in there that's sending inappropriate pain signals, or because that's all they could come up with. Maybe your brain isn't connecting well to your body. But they pretty much dead-ended me that there was nothing else they could do for me except this caustic medicine that, is really not what I wanted long-term. That wasn't my long-term solution. But when I moved to Florida, I had to get a new primary care. And I specifically and purposely did not transfer my files because I was ashamed, literally, as a patient, I was ashamed about at least one thing I knew that was written in there that would brand me, that would give this doctor a completely inaccurate description of who I am and what I'm about. And that's that my symptoms were psychological. So I broached the condition with my new doctor and I said, you've done up to a muscle biopsy. A surgical muscle biopsy was done during COVID. And that's how bad I wanted to get an answer. And I just knew that was going to be the solution to all my problems. And
so you had the muscle biopsy?
I did. I really thought there was something that they would find that would prove I was having this horrible muscular pain. And to date, they had said fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. We don't know. Might be something, might be nothing. So I felt like I had come to the end of the road and I gave up. I gave up looking to the medical community for an answer. And I tried to do things like exercise and eating right and, doing all the things you're supposed to do to maintain your health. Nothing moved the needle at all. So, this is 9 years after I started. I'm laying in bed, which I have to do a lot. Laying in bed normalizes my blood pressure, and I'll get into more of the new diagnosis in a minute.
Yeah, for sure. And again, Laura, this all started 9 years ago for you.
Yes.
Is that right?
Coincided with an auto accident and a brain injury. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was at the best facilities, and they should have known this. Even back then, they should have known this. But I'm laying in bed one day and I'm scrolling through Facebook videos, which is what you do when you lay in bed a lot. And I see this woman reclining in her car and her face is all red and she's crying. And I looked at that picture and I don't know why I didn't scroll by other than I thought, oh my God, I know how she feels. When you're just so defeated, you go to the grocery store, you come out and you're like, oh my God, I've run a marathon. So I clicked on it because I really related to that picture. And she's an amazing woman. I'll talk about her later. But yeah, I clicked on the video and she started talking about her symptoms. And I thought, oh, wow, that's me. And then another one. And I was like, wow, that's me. And so on until I was like, oh my God, what has this girl got? Because I've got it too. And it turns out that she was describing POTS, P-O-T-S, Postural, Orthostatic, Tachycardia syndrome. She also has Ehlers-Danlos, which is a suspected diagnosis of mine. In fact, I'm going to USF Tampa to get tested on Monday.
Okay. Laura, let me stop you right there because I'm curious at this point, with all the physicians that you had seen and then the muscle biopsy, which you were hoping would be the end all be all to a diagnosis, how are you coping through all of this in the meantime, not only for yourself, but with your family as well? When, like you said, you don't look sick, what are you assuming people are thinking? And how do you deal with maybe some of their reactions about your symptoms?
I kept pretty quiet about it outside of my family. I think people know that I had a brain injury, but I'm not the kind of person that's going to go broadcast anything to anybody outside the family. And thank God my work ethic prior to this was beyond reproach. I mean, I was kicking it. I was one of the top agents in the state of Maryland and the entire DC Baltimore region. And my whole life I've left jobs where they replaced me with more than one person because I was this superwoman, super performing at work. And I forgot where I was. I'm so sorry. That's like a characteristic of this.
Wait,
Brain
no,
fog. Brain fog is one of the main POTS symptoms.
that's okay. We were talking about how you cope and your family has been coping with your symptoms and how it's affected lifestyle and how people react to that.
I really only shared it with my immediate family, and thank God my daughter, my husband recognized what a workhorse I was before, and I had been my whole life. And they completely embraced me and understood it and supported me when I was like, I can't work today. I can't work today because I can't think and I hurt all over. Never once did their belief in me waver. And without that, I don't even think I'd be here today. I really don't. I think that I would not have been able to handle this alone. And without that support, it's critical to anybody that has this to have that support system. And because we look healthy, there's a lot of people who have family members, husbands, wives, daughters, sons that don't believe them. And that is a particular kind of hell that I have not had to live through. But I completely empathize, sympathize, and want to give everybody that has that going on with a POTS diagnosis, I just want to give them a hug because this is hard.
Yeah. I actually have a book that's called You Don't Look Sick. I haven't read it yet, but it is about how people with chronic illnesses deal this almost the stigma of having symptoms but not looking sick, and people questioning, what do you mean you can't come to the party, or what do you mean you have to lay down again, or what? I don't
Why are
understand.
you standing me up last minute? Again, you hit on something huge there, Laura, in that I don't accept invitations very lightly, or I tell people, listen, I have an invisible illness. I don't give a whole lot of details, but I say I may not look sick, but there's times I wake up and my body just doesn't cooperate and I can't go. I just missed an outing last Saturday with my best girls. They all went up to Sarasota to party and watch a show and eat dinner, and I couldn't do it. And I was watching the conversation take place on Facebook, and I was like, holy cow, they've been at it for 7 hours and they're still ticking. And I missed it terribly, but in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm so glad I didn't go because they would have seen how weak I am. I would have been the one holding up the group that contains women that are in their 80s, and I would be the slow one. I would be the one that couldn't keep up. So I miss out on a lot of social things, and it's very hard to form friendships. I made a huge effort to do that when I moved to Florida. But when I hang out with women my age, I feel like the elderly. They're like, okay, well, let's go dancing now. We've had dinner, we've had drinks, let's go dancing. And I'm like, oh God, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I can do that. And what do you say when you're with a group of women that are, 20 years older than you and 10 years younger than you, and you're the one that can't do what everybody else does?
And I could see from their perspective, because just seeing your beautiful self here on camera, and again, you're very articulate, and sure, I could see where anybody would question whether or not you could go out for a social evening or whatever. So I could see that, but on the inside, you're really struggling, and
I'm like
now
bruised all over. I'm a big bruise all over. Everything hurts. Yeah. And then the complication of POTS, I don't know if, we really didn't segue a whole into that, but the symptoms that come with POTS are now on top of my brain injury, and they are vicious. I think that people have heard of ALS, which is horrible disease. They've heard of MS, they've heard of Parkinson's, and everybody has a built-in amount of empathy for people that have that. Someone walks up to you and they have Parkinson's, they're visibly shaking. You can tell that there's something wrong. We don't have that with POTS. We look very normal. So the assumption is that we're hypochondriacs, or that it really couldn't be that bad. I'm like, what can I show you short of blood to make you understand how hard life is every day? How hard it is to wake up in the morning and think, oh God, how am I going to do this again? How am I going to make it through the day? Will I be able to make dinner tonight? Because my husband's done it the last 6 nights in a row. Can I get to the bathroom that needs cleaning? You don't get to make those decisions. You wake up and your day is decided for you, and it can change by the hour. Literally, you can wake up feeling great. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's catch up on chores, things I've got behind on. And by noon of that day, I'm in the bed with the flu.
Laura, once you saw that video and you were identifying with that woman who was really distraught about her symptoms and what she'd been going through, what did you do after that?
Well, I Googled the heck out of everything. I got to know all the details, and I may not retain it all, but I'm going to read it over and over and over again until I get it. I Googled POTS, and every symptom lined up. And I have a Fitbit watch that I wear every day. And honestly, I had noticed that my pulse was very high at times, but I thought, oh, it's because you're heavy. It's because you're a chubby girl. You're not healthy and you're trying to do this walk. But I came to find out through my research in POTS that 160 pulse is not normal for anybody. So I had recently been to my heart doctor because I said, I feel like my heart's doing flip-flops. It's just not doing what it's supposed to do. Don't feel great. And they put me through all the phases, all the paces, all the tests and said, girl, you've got the heart of a 40-year-old. You're great. Nothing wrong. You're fine. Again, a doctor tells me everything's fine. So what do? I walk away and I think, wow, it's really weird that my heart does this. And I can feel it and hear it at times, but I didn't equate it to being vertical. I didn't equate it to standing up. It was just sometimes my heart did weird things.
So not that, not being
any doctor with any knowledge of thoughts along this journey, every technician at the cardiologist's office, the doctor, the nurse, everybody missed this. And at one point I did tell them, I said, you know what? There's a big differential between my sitting heart rate and my standing heart rate. And I remember that the nurse did my heart rate and did my pulse standing up, maybe less than 2 minutes. She did that. And she's like, nope, you're fine. It's pretty much the same. Well, I've come to find out that 4 minutes is my secret number. I can go from a heart rate of 60 to 130 in 4 minutes standing.
Well,
so
yeah.
But I found that it's tilt table test is the diagnostic standard to diagnose POTS, but there's what they call the poor man's tilt. And that's where you lay down for 5 minutes. You get your pulse as kind of as stable as it's going to get. And I usually drop into the high 50s, low 60s. And then you stand completely unassisted for 10 minutes and take your pulse every 2 minutes. You can also take your blood pressure every 2 minutes, but you don't really need that to do the diagnosis. So I would get a little piece of paper and have my little chart, at 2 minutes, at 4 minutes, at 6 minutes, at 8 minutes, at 10 minutes, I would write down those readings. And I was like, wow, I've got what's 60 to 140, 80 beats a minute, I think. And the diagnostic for POTS is if your heart rate goes up 30 beats or more, if you're over the age of 16, or 40 beats or more, if you are under the age of 16, then that's pretty diagnostic for POTS. Mine were consistently 80 to 100 on the pulse standing. So picture you're going to the grocery store. You feel pretty good. You're driving in your car. And I sit around 100 when I'm driving because it makes me a little nervous. And then you go in and you walk around the grocery store. And as you're going, you're going, oh, I feel worse and worse because, you've hit that 4 minute mark and now you're just going up. So, by the time I make it past the milk aisle, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to pass out. But you don't, because the doctors have told you you're normal. You're not going to pass out. This is all in your head. So I'd be saying this to myself. It's in your head. Your heart's normal. All your tests are normal. You're fine. Keep going. So I'm pushing through this, as is my style. And then I'm feeling, after I finish my grocery shopping, like I run a marathon. I get in the car and I'm out of breath and panting, and I go home and I lay flat and then I feel better. But I don't know how I could have described that to a doctor better than I stand up and I feel like I'm going to fall down, or I stand up and I feel like I'm going to pass out. And I feel like it gave them every indication, and not one person in this huge chain of world-class medical facilities I've been privileged to go to, not one doctor recognized these symptoms.
So no physician at this point is suggesting POTS.
Nothing. Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But
Laura, you and I talked about it when we first chatted, and this is just my perspective. Post-COVID, I got on a lot of long haul Facebook pages because I'm actually trying to figure out some things myself, which aren't dissimilar to some of the symptoms that you are mentioning. So I'm still pushing through figuring out some of my symptoms and things that I've been feeling, sensing for the last year plus. But POTS came up a lot in some of these long haul COVID posts on Facebook. And not that I know everything, as you know, I do market research for healthcare, and I've heard about a lot of different kinds of conditions, but POTS felt new to me. But you said that POTS really isn't a new condition.
No.
Did I hear it right?
You're absolutely correct. I think that it was first diagnosed in the 1800s, late 1800s. And at least for the last 20 years, I am aghast that it has not made any medical journals, because it's not like there's 2 or 3 of us bopping around out here. There's several million Americans that are affected by this. Now, several million isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, but it's not exactly uber rare either that it completely gets overlooked. But it is so not known in the medical community. And I will take my dying breath telling people about POTS. I went to a massage yesterday and I was like, listen, you need to know, Lauren, it's my massage therapist, my friend, and you need to know about POTS because you're going to come across people that have these weird symptoms, and you need to at least make them aware of the fact that if they're having unexplained symptoms, the doctor can answer, test your pulse standing, give it 10 minutes. I'm actually going to print up some cards with the directions for the standing test and symptoms of POTS. I will hand out everywhere, because even though there's not a whole lot they can do to treat it, the vindication of getting a diagnosis had me in tears. I sobbed like a baby because I kept telling the doctors, this is what I've been going through for 9 years and nobody's listened to me. You just witnessed when I did my tilt table test. I said, you just witnessed my life for the last 9 years being told there was nothing wrong with me.
Wow.
And, here's this tilt tables test. It's supposed to take 4 hours. I sent my husband away from the hospital because, like, babe, it's going to take 4 hours. They're going to have to give me glycerin. It's going to be a big mess, da, da, da. I didn't last 4 minutes before I was throwing up on my nurse. I don't know if the podcast.
Wow.
And it's the most indescribable feeling. I don't want to scare people away from a tilt table test, but it's not a pleasant experience. And I didn't know that going in, thank God, or I might not have gone.
So you threw up on your nurse. But it sounds like that you said that's the most definitive diagnostic test. What kind of doctor ordered that tilt test for you? Who was the breakthrough doctor or the specialist, really?
It was the only breakthrough specialist. I basically fed them a diagnosis. I went, after I'd done this couple weeks of tracking my pulse, I went to my doctor, and I'm very hesitant to approach doctors with any sense of knowledge because they're like, oh, I don't want your Google stats and this and that, which is fine. I can understand that. But if you don't give me enough information in your office, what choice do I have but Google? That's it. And I Google very responsibly. I look at is this person just complaining? Is this a real backed study? I'm putting together my own information about POTS and saying, oh crap, this is absolutely what I've got. So I went to my primary care and I said, I need you to prove to me, I need you to exclude POTS as a diagnosis for me. And she said, POTS, what is POTS? And I said, I gave her the Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia syndrome. And she said, I've never heard of that. And this is a doctor that's in her 60s. She's an experienced doctor. And she went back and she Googled it. And she came back and literally
doctor who Googled Dr. Google, huh?
Exactly. Well, whatever. They may have some medical database they use, of course, I guess I'm assuming. But anyway, she went back and researched it. She came back and she said, okay. And she was hesitant to do this 10-minute test on me. And she had a mask on. And I said, I need you to look me in my eyes, Dr. K, and understand that my quality of life is about a 2. That I am not able to do the things that I should be able to do at this age and this fitness level. And I'm sick all the time. And I need you to rule this out as a diagnosis. So she really begrudgingly agreed to do it. had me lay down. I asked her to turn the lights off because people with POTS are often very light sensitive. It's all about how your brain communicates with your body. And so I sat there, I got my pulse down. She came in and she was doing pulse and blood pressure every 2 minutes. And she was surprised with the results. I could tell. And she went back to her desk and Googled or went into her medical manuals or whatever and came back and she said, you need an electrophysiologist. And that's a specialized cardiologist doctor that works on the electric functioning of the heart.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'd never heard of one. And I went into that office and thank God it was a particularly symptomatic day. And as I'm sitting there, with my legs swinging off the exam table, my legs are turning blue. And I'm like, well, my legs just always do that. It's a weird thing, but my legs turn blue. And like everything below my knees, if I'm sitting or standing, all the blood, I know now it's blood rushing to my feet. I didn't know then, but he said, does that happen all the time? And I said, yeah, it's just very normal for me. And he asked me if it was uncomfortable. I said, yeah, it kind of feels like you're bloated, like your legs are bloated and my legs feel very heavy all the time. Sometimes I have to lift them into the car because they're so painful. And I said, I think that I have POTS, Dysautonomia POTS. It's just what I've been calling it, but it's also called dysautonomia.
Well,
and he said, I studied under one of the doctors that, made some final determination for POTS. So I'm not completely unfamiliar with it. And he was just an amazing doctor.
wow.
And he scheduled me for a tilt table test, which was what I was going in there to ask for. And he came up with that on his own. I did the tilt table test. Was supposed to be 4 hours. I lasted 4 minutes. And I really would have gone to screaming if they had not put me down. I was like, put me down, put me down, put me down. I couldn't breathe.
You feel like you were going to pass out.
Like I was going to die. I've never experienced anything like that before. And I don't know if that's super great information to have if you're going into a tilt table test, but I understand it's not that unpleasant for a lot of people. But I have a particularly perky case of POTS, apparently. And it felt like my systems were shutting down. And apparently they found out then that I also have orthostatic hypotension, which means that as my pulse is climbing up over 120, my blood pressure is bottoming out. So that's where I'm getting that I feel like I'm going to pass out. I really am going to pass out. POTS is a malfunction of your autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
The things that you do automatically that you don't think about, blinking your eyes, getting enough saliva in your mouth, talking to your intestines, basically. It's your command center. And basically, if you equate it to like the main system in your car, a light will go off and it'll say your oil's low. And I do believe I got this from Summer Dashe, who's my POTS hero. She's the one that made that video of her in the car sweating and crying. God bless her. But
that's her name?
Summer Dashe. Yes, the last name is Dashe.
Okay.
And she really has done so much to bring this issue to light. She's kind of my hero, and I credit her with my diagnosis from her video.
Wow. So you had the tilt test done. And where
Yes.
is head now? Like, are you having a party or did you feel like, oh my gosh,
Very
I'm
briefly.
not crazy? I'm not goofy in the head?
I can't even imagine the vindication. I'm in the room still with the cardiologist and 2 nurses, and I'm going, you just don't know. I've had this for 9 years, and everybody tells me I'm crazy, but this is what I'm dealing with every single day, and you just witnessed it. You're the first people to know. Like, I'm just jabbering. And I remember leaving the hospital. They had given me an IV to get some fluids in me. And I remember leaving the hospital. We went to an Italian restaurant, and I was like, oh, babe, I'm not crazy. It was just elation. And then followed shortly thereafter within a couple of days of, oh my God, how am I going to get help for this? And within a couple of weeks, it became apparent there was no help for this. We'll probably talk about that more, but yeah, it was definitely an evolution from, yes, I'm not crazy to, oh my God, this is how I'm going to have to live the rest of my life.
Yeah. So you get this. So again, going back to the fact that it was the electrophysiologist, the EP, that ordered the tilt test. For whatever reason, he took that upon himself to be the ordering physician or the ordering specialist. And
Yes.
what is he saying at this point about your diagnosis? It's been confirmed. What is he saying?
He was amazing. He was literally, mopping the sweat off my brow and caring for me like I was his, relative. He was amazing. He had his office follow up with me immediately and prescribed compression stockings, talked about adding salt to my diet, and just gave me a couple of things and gave me a beta blocker. And then I was to talk with him, a couple weeks later. That got rescheduled because he had a surprise surgery that morning. So I'm waiting a really long time to get the actual diagnosis, but I was pretty sure at that point that, it was definitive for POTS.
Say that again.
And in the meantime,
Laura,
I was very sure that tilt table test was going to be definitive for POTS just based on how my body reacted, but I didn't actually see the test results for a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm waiting to see the electrophysiologist again, I'm dialing up every doctor I can find, and I'm realizing that nowhere in or close or within an hour of my small town is anyone that would treat POTS. And so I thought, I'm a go-getter. I'm going to get help. I know I need a neurologist because it's an autonomic nervous system thing. So I'm dialing neurologist, and I'm getting 2 answers and only 2 answers. One is POTS. We don't know anything about that. And the other is, oh, I'm sorry, we don't treat that. And I'm amazed. I'm thinking, what if I had multiple sclerosis? You treat that, don't you? Nobody knew and nobody cared how devastating and life-altering this diagnosis was.
You said you were getting 2 answers. One was POTS. What's that? We don't know what that is. 2, we don't treat that. Given that the electrophysiologist had made the diagnosis, he's put you on something of a plan, is he suggesting that you pursue a neurology consult, or is this just a product of you doing the digging and the research?
It's the product of me doing the digging and the research. And at one point, I had one neurologist office who I'd left a message, and they called me back and they said, "Honey, I'm so sorry. We do know what that is, but we do not treat it here. You really need to go to USF Tampa." So then I had to go back to my doctor, say, I need a referral to USF Tampa. I had to call them, schedule everything, get it set up. My doctor wasn't even nice enough to send them all my records. She did send my records. She just didn't send complete records. And with my insurance, I can only go to specialists with a referral from primary care. She did not offer to. She did not, even when I asked, she said, "I really don't know what to do. The electrophysiologist is the only person I know to send you to." So really just kind of put me out there on my own to figure all this out. This day, she was like, "I don't know what it is. I can't treat it." And she was so hands off about that. It wasn't even, let me do a little research and see what we can do together. Just nothing. I will not treat that. You need to go to a specialist.
What are Laura, what are you thinking about the healthcare system at that point? After everything you've been through, now you're kind of next kind of dead end or roadblock is this doctor saying she's throwing her hands up in the air. What is this telling you about our healthcare system?
Well, at first, I thought it was a byproduct of living in small town in Florida, and that is definitely some of it. But I've come to a horrifying conclusion for anybody that has POTS, unfortunately, and that's that there are 1,000,000 times more cases than there are doctors. That 8 and 12-month wait lists are the norm if you can find a provider. That specialists in POTS generally convert their offices to exclude insurance coverage because they have so many patients, they just want to operate on a cash basis. So I found through my own research, a POTS specialist in Clearwater, Florida. He's pretty well renowned. And I got to him before I was able to get back to the electrophysiologist. I didn't need a referral. He's cash only. So it's, X amount of amount for an hour. And I thought, wow, I'm going to get an hour with a doctor. I'll pay $1 million for that.
Yeah.
And
what's his specialty overall?
He's a primary care provider, but he has taken a big interest in POTS and the suffering of people with POTS. And he's expert at finding the right pharmaceuticals to assist you if you choose to go that route.
Hmm. Why
He
do you
also does some testing.
Sorry, why do you think he's cash only? I think that's interesting because if he's an MD, and he's doing testing that you could get really from any provider that would be covered by insurance, why do you think he's cash only?
Well, he's not the only one. Because the millions of us that are afflicted with this syndrome, exactly what I told you. We don't know what that is. We don't treat that. So they're all reaching out. And if they find somebody that even takes a mild interest in POTS that wants to make that a specialty, there are people clamoring to get to that doctor.
Hold on,
And
hold on,
I
Laura.
mean, again,
Hold on, Laura. Yeah, we got the underwater sound again. Okay, try it again.
there are so many POTS patients that do not have a doctor. And there are so few doctors that will even get into POTS because it's a complicated mess. And what works on one POTS patient works on one POTS patient. You can't, there's no one size fits all. Here, take these 3 prescriptions. You're going to be great. You've got people with POTS that have low blood pressure, people with POTS that have high blood pressure, people whose pulse go to 210, people whose pulse sits around 100. It is so individualized that you can't just throw something at it. Well, my estimation of why doctors don't want to do this is because there is no real fix. And they don't tell you that, but there is no real fix. So you're either choosing to get a pharmaceutical plan, and that's not the way that I went. I did try some things and they were not good for me, or you're doing it holistically, or you're doing a combination of that. And I jumped right into medicine because in my head at that point, I was still thinking, they can fix me. They can fix me. They can make it better. And I was hanging to that, just thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do another day of living with POTS, but here I've got some hope. And I got to tell you, I don't even know how to hope anymore. I don't, because of everything that's happened. I have zero hope. And I think there's a lot of, I think I'm not alone. I think there's great numbers of people with POTS that have no hope, because you're going to find out there's only a few things that you can do about it. And I'm on YouTube, I'm on Google, I'm just everywhere. Where can I find a doctor? And I found a chiropractic neurologist, which he's not really a neurologist, but there's some sort of tack on to chiropractic that you can get a neurology specialist. And I was like, he's curing people. He is actually making people better from POTS. So of course I called him. He's in Michigan. I don't care. I've not found anybody local that can treat this. And I'm like, I want to go through your program. I want to do it. Okay, well, we don't take insurance. And so I'm like, okay, well, what's the cost? Well, it's $12,000
Oh
for
my
2 weeks.
God.
For 2 weeks, plus your living expenses to get to a different state and stay
Yeah.
there for 2 weeks.
What's
So that,
included? Do you know? What's included in that
he
$12,000?
has a whole protocol for POTS people. There's another doctor in Texas and there's one in Arizona. Literally, I'm sitting in Florida and these are my options. There are more options for pediatric POTS patients. I think there's a little more hope for them because they can often grow out of it. But adults, I don't think doctors want the ego blow of, I can't make this person better. That my little bag of tricks is not going to work for this person unless I get super creative. And those doctors who are getting super creative have so many people knocking on their door just for this one diagnosis. Why would they go through all the red tape of filing for insurance and everything when there are enough rich people that have this that they can operate on a cash basis? There's no other explanation.
Yeah, and if POTS is this kind of esoteric diagnosis like chronic fatigue and some of those other things that don't have very concrete symptomatology that insurance could say, well, I need that code and then we'll cover it. It sounds like it's just kind of an out there syndrome that doesn't really have hard, fast ICD-9, whatever code. I think it's 10, ICD-10 number in order to put it through insurance. So yeah, certainly the cost of running all that through from an overhead perspective for a physician is probably relatively high, and certainly they're in business to be in business. And
Absolutely. You
I,
can't
I,
blame them, but it
yeah,
feels like it is discrimination. And I
it is.
probably found 6 providers, none of them took insurance.
Wow, it does bring up an access issue, certainly for people who even like yourself, you have insurance and you have to go and not even just out of network route, but completely fee for service route. And just think of people who don't have insurance at all or don't have as good of coverage to begin with, just from their ASIC, that they are certainly suffering, no doubt. And I think it's interesting, though, that it was I'm going back to the electrophysiologist idea that it was the EP that suggested the tilt test, but really couldn't advance the ball really to get you to some type of relief or just kind of be able to turn the corner from, okay, we got this diagnosis now. Now what do we do? And so you are planning on going to Michigan. Is that your plan next step?
Yeah. No, I think that's probably going to be a last resort for me, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I think that his waiting list now is over 6 months. I'm still putting my house together from a hurricane, so all my extra money's going there. But when I look at that amount of money versus being able to function, it's definitely still a possibility for me, but I'm trying to work within the insurance system. It's just very difficult. I finally got an appointment with USF Tampa, and that was a televisit. And I think now I literally have PTSD from dealing with doctors. And I'm not one to just throw and say, oh, I've got PTSD. I go into a doctor's office and I cry because I have been made to feel so helpless, psychotic even, unreasonable, pushy, and unpleasant, which is not who I am naturally. But I turn into a gibbering idiot in front of a doctor now because I'm like, oh, everything hurts and da 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 da. It wears you down. So
where are you now, Laura, as far as you're going to Tampa, right? And what are you doing for yourself now currently? Now that you have this diagnosis, at least you have a direction. You don't really have a treatment plan at this point, but what are some of the things that you learned might help, or what is helping in the meantime?
Oh, that's such a great question, Laura. And I want to get this out to anybody that has POTS that's newly diagnosed. Before you try pharmaceuticals, there are some lifestyle changes that are hard, but they make a difference, and they are exercise. Everybody's worst enemy, right? Everybody needs to exercise, but POTS people have to start with a very slow. Like they recommend a cardio rehab as if you've had heart failure, congestive heart failure or something. They recommend a program where you go through as if somebody is completely disabled, and it's a very long 6-month plus process for you to build up your muscles, your strength, and everything again, because your body's been telling you to lie down for however long. Mine was 9 years. So you have to build up that strength again. And there's only a few ways that you can do it. You can't stand. So you have to do recumbent biking, swimming in the pool with all of the pressure around us. It's kind of like a big compression sock. Pool is your friend if you're POTS. You can be completely normal cognitively and physically in a pool. So it's great if you can get to even an aerobics class. People that can't get a lot accomplished on land with POTS are pretty normal in the water. You can do recumbent biking, yoga, or Pilates. And those are really your only options. And if you go out there and go, I'm going to walk a mile a day, you're going to land yourself in bed and completely incapacitated. So
with there being so little information on treatment, where is the exercise recommendations coming from, or the exercise protocols?
The protocols that I'm going over now are universal on every website that discusses POTS. If you're not like me, you're not a Googler and you haven't looked into it, then you need to know. The first, and I think the most important thing, is exercise. And boy, is that hard when you feel like you have the flu. But you got to get out there and do it, because you're not going to get better. The more you lay in bed with POTS, the more you sit with a POTS diagnosis, the worse it's going to be. You're setting yourself back and trying to protect yourself. So you have to exercise and do it very gradually. There's something called the CHOP, CHOP, protocol. And that is way too complicated for me to understand. But it's like you do 3 sit-ups this day and 3 sit-ups that day. It's very specific, and that's supposed to be excellent for POTS people. I'm lucky I
Wow.
have a pool, so I choose the pool.
Nice. I don't blame you.
The second most important thing in my estimation is your diet. The majority of POTS people, not POD people, POTS people are lactose and gluten intolerant. So if you can get a test for celiac, great. If not, try to eliminate it. I did, and a lot of my muscular pain went away. I don't know if that's POTS or Ehlers-Danlos, but it helped me overall. And it's a frontline recommendation from our Dr. T, our POTS specialist here in Clearwater. I also find that sugar just completely sets off my system. And I'm hearing that a lot on the POTS boards from other people that have the same thing. Sugar is our enemy. It hurts us much more so than the average person because sugar is not great anyway. So the next thing is we can't hold fluids. Like literally fluids go right through us. Anything you drink, forget it, it's gone. So they recommend, my recommendation from the POTS specialist, again, with pharmaceuticals, he's not really like an interventional kind of guy, was 4 grams of salt a day added to what I'd normally eat. And I'm not a big salt person anyway. I don't add it to food. But that's enough salt that I have to do it in tablets because it's like way too much to just eat per day. And then you have got to get like 4 liters of water. I shoot for 128 ounces a day.
Wow.
I generally get 98. That extra 30 ounces is tough to get in. But they give you the salt, so you're retaining the fluid because your body, in addition to having incorrect blood flow from the control panel, you don't have enough blood to start with. I think it's called hypervolemic or something. We're a quart low on blood. So you're trying to plump that up, get as much volume as you can so that everything flows a little bit better.
Wow. So if this is all from the POTS specialist that you're seeing in your area, do you feel that you're still in a position to go the next step and get another opinion? Where are you on that?
Well, I'm very clear I have a POTS diagnosis, and that's just strictly based on the pulse and the fatigue and the brain fog. We don't always hold everything in our heads like we should. I think it is less common to have POTS and POTS only, like maybe 5%. And that's a total guess. That's not any internet statistic. I'm guessing just from my observing other people. Probably 90% or more of us have a comorbidity, Ehlers-Danlos, mast cell activation syndrome, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, high or low blood pressure. They really don't know. It's like chicken and egg. Did POTS give you these things or did these things give you POTS? They know now with long COVID becoming a thing you'd mentioned earlier. I am going to cite this statistic because it came from the National Institutes of Health, and it's 68% of long COVID diagnoses are actually POTS.
Interesting.
Super interesting. And maybe that will shine a light now that there's higher numbers of us suffering from this. And it's a true suffering that maybe we'll get a little bit of research and a little bit of help.
And a lot more conversation. Like I said, not that I know anything about anything or everything, but it seems like POTS was coming up a lot in a lot of the Facebook pages with regard to long COVID. How are you going about finding out if you have any of these, as you said, comorbidities, Ehlers-Danlos, anything else that could have triggered the POTS? What's next step for you there?
And next step to me is USF Tampa Neurology. And while they don't treat POTS, they test for and treat comorbidities. So I think on Monday, I'm getting tested for small fiber neuropathy. Based on my symptoms, like I'll feel like I have a spider running on my leg or cold dripping down my leg or a zap, an electric shock. It's just a lot of weird things. Fasciculation where your skin is jumping. I'll get those all over.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely going to get that. I'm getting an EMG, and I believe they're going to test for Ehlers-Danlos as well. And I have a backup plan with Dr. T, the POTS specialist. He has sent me a genetic testing kit, which is a way to find out, because these things do date that they do tie back to your genetics, and they can find errors in your genetics that shouldn't be there, and therefore conclude that you have Ehlers-Danlos based on your symptoms and your genetic predisposition.
That's really interesting because I've been hearing from other people that I've interviewed that getting genetic testing ordered by a physician is sometimes cumbersome just because it's expensive, and insurance might say, yeah, no, you don't need that. We don't think that that's warranted. How is it that he is sending you a test? What is it? Do you know where it's coming from?
I don't know. His office is so fantastic. I wanted to hedge my bets in case the facility in Tampa doesn't pursue Ehlers-Danlos with me. I've heard there's a skin test for it, and then I've been told there's not. So I can't find a definitive answer on that. But if they don't test me based on my symptoms and my request, then I have the backup kit from the doctor, and I will do that on my own. And it may be something I have to pay for, but I think insurance will cover it because this doctor is saying I have a high degree of certainty that you have this.
Interesting. Yeah. So it must be some lab that he's working
Yes. Yes. I literally emailed his office, said, do you test for this? And they said yes. And his amazing assistant I just got a FedEx notification this morning that it's on the way. And I think I contacted him on Monday. So,
Have you pursued any kind of integrative medicine type of physicians where they're testing for minerals and vitamin deficiencies or any other toxicities?
not yet, but I did a lot of research and found out kind of what what you need if you have POTS. So I do a lot of magnesium, a lot of joint supplements that my orthopedic dude recommended, and vitamin D. It's very common to have super low vitamin D with POTS. Vitamin B, a good broad spectrum vitamin B is, needed just to kind of maintain energy. And then my particular type of POTS, which is hyperadrenergic, is just so pleasant because in addition to all the symptoms of the flu, I get randomly shot throughout the day 3 to 100 times. I get shot with adrenaline, and it's the kind of adrenaline rush that you would have if you were in a near auto accident where your heart starts beating really fast and you feel like you can't catch your breath and you're like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, henny penny. So those are no fun at all. So I took a recommendation from somebody on the POTS Facebook page that they take theanine, and they recommended a specific supplement called Theanine Serene. And I've been taking that, and in conjunction with my beta blocker and anti-anxiety Lexapro, I almost have those under control. But they used to just wake me up wide awake at 3 a.m. every day to find something to worry about. So theanine was a big key, I think, in that for me. But I did my own research. I do have an appointment because I don't give up. I want to get back to real Laura. I want to get back to...
I don't blame you. You are like I said, smart, sassy lady, and you have a lot going for you and a lot to do, a lot to accomplish. And I know, and I could see where you would just say, well, I guess I just accept what I have. And a lot of people would do that, or might accept the diagnosis that the doctor gave them, or just accept the fact that there is no diagnosis and just move on as best as possible. But what would you suggest to someone who is in your position? What kind of advice would you give them?
The most important thing is just a reiteration of don't try pharmaceuticals until you've exhausted exercise, eating a good diet, adding salt, and adding a lot of water. You can get into the pharmaceuticals, but what they're doing is basically manipulating your system to say, okay, when you stand up, you get low blood pressure. So we're going to give you a drug. Fludrocortisone's a big one that helps a lot of people with POTS. But I had my blood pressure up to 208 over 113 one night, and I had to go to the emergency room.
Wow.
They're manipulating your systems to get them to function normally. And that's perfectly okay if you choose to go the pharmaceutical route, but give some thought to it's harder to exercise. It's harder to drink enough water that you're going to flood yourself. It's harder to gulp salt. But the long-term effects of the pharmaceuticals that I've researched are good. I mean, they're just not good. And I'm not a doctor, but that's just not the route I've chosen to go. And I had 3 drugs thrown at me at the same time. And I woke up one morning and I couldn't stop sobbing. I was just hysterical crying. And I'm looking at my husband going, I'm not even sad. What is going on here? And there's no doubt in my mind it was a reaction to a drug. And then the super high blood pressure, which comes with its own uncomfortable list of symptoms. It's not an invisible thing, or it wasn't for me. Yeah, I would try the lifestyle changes before you do that. And then at least you'll know what symptoms you can clear up. So they're just not throwing the sink at you with all these different medicines that manipulate your body, manipulate your autonomic nervous system. Because I'm going to know what's working.
Yeah. How would you recommend to someone with who would have any kind of maybe vague symptoms that don't get put in that pretty little box that doctors like to put the symptoms in and call it a something and give it a name? How would you help somebody if you had to counsel them on how to power through to find a diagnosis for these unknown, unnamed symptoms?
My journey is probably really typical of what people with a lot of unusual things go through, but I can only speak to POTS. And I would say if you have flu-like symptoms, because there's not a lot of stuff that gives you that. If you have the muscular pain, if you have, and that could be Ehlers-Danlos. I don't know that my muscular pain is POTS yet. But if you feel like you're going to pass out, and I used to say that all the time, I don't know what it feels like to pass out because I never actually passed out. But I would tell my husband, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to pass out. If you have any kind of inkling that your body is not working correctly, there's flu-like symptoms, you feel like you're going to pass out, you're dizzy, your cognition is off, stand up. And then there's a saying, stand up to POTS. And that's the deal. You have got to get your doctor to take your vital signs standing up. Or if you've got a fitness watch, you can do it at home. I tried to post on one of the pages recently an article that said, your fitness watch already knows you have POTS. And I was going from before I did the water, before I did the salt, before I did the exercise, before I did all that, my Fitbit Tuesday of the week, it determines by my age and weight how many minutes I should have in peak heart zone for the week. Well, I should have been a clue, but by Tuesday of the week, 2 days into the week, it's like, congratulations, you've met your heart goal for the week. And I'm like, oh, I got out of bed and I made breakfast and I went for a swim. I didn't realize that was a symptom, but it was. And I look back at my charts from my Fitbit and I can see my heart rate's at 160 and I can equate that to, oh, I took the dogs for a quick walk, or I went to the grocery store, or I went to the flea market. And my heart's sitting at 160 and popping right along. So had I known how to read those charts or known the importance of taking a fitness watch charts to my doctor, and I think you have to subscribe to the premium. I know for Fitbit, you have to subscribe for $9 a month to the premium program to get those reports. But had I known the significance, had I not thought, well, you're overweight, you're out of shape, Laura, this is all just part of it. You're probably going to die early because look, your heart's going to explode. I did take that to the doctor and got all my heart tested. It was fine, but I didn't think to push it beyond that. And when I look at the difference in my heart rhythms now, my heart pace, not the rhythm, and before I did any preemptive measures, it's dramatically different. And I think the diagnosis allowed me to be kind to myself, to say that, you know what, if I feel like I'm going to pass out, you can't push through because pushing through makes it worse. I'm going to go lay down, which comes with its own set of, I'm lazy, I'm worthless, I'm less than human, my husband has to do all the work. I mean, all the psychological torture that you don't give yourself the grace.
Yeah, more negative self-talk, which certainly does comfort your body or overall. Yeah. Laura, what's the silver lining through all of this?
Laura, I hate to even say this, but I have not found one. My silver lining is that I have an amazing husband that basically is my caretaker. There is no silver lining. It's not been an easy journey. There's absolutely no end in sight. Maybe the silver lining is finding a community of myself, people that are going through the same thing and having that. It can be discouraging when you hear everybody saying, oh my God, I feel so bad. And people are talking about ending their lives and they can't live with this. And yeah, I haven't found a silver lining. If I do, I will shout it out to the world, but I haven't found one yet. There's no treatment and there's no medical resources to really help you.
Yeah. What does it do for you knowing that there is, though, that camaraderie, that there are people get it, they get you, they understand what you're going through?
Sometimes it's super helpful. And I see somebody that's like, oh, I'm new to the board and thank you for accepting my thing. And I think, oh, kiddo, you're in for such a battle. If I see people getting down on themselves, like I have been down on myself and I'm getting better about it now that I know what I've got, I support them and I say, extend the same grace to yourself that you'd give to your best friend or your daughter or your son or your husband. Extend that grace. You are not lazy. This is debilitating. And you have got to advocate for yourself because nobody's going to, and that's going to be hard, but you can get a little bit better. There's no cure. There's no great, oh, you're going to get 50% better. This is going to be wonderful. But be kind to yourself and don't fall into the depression. It's so hard not to be depressed because nobody understands that this suffering in POTS, I'm going to put it right up against Parkinson's and MS. And I'm going to say I probably have more pain on a daily basis and less intervention with healthcare. It's horrible. And you can live with that. You can try the drugs. You can try the healthy measures. But there's nothing that's going to dramatically move the needle yet. But these long COVID people may change that because there's so many. And COVID is such a huge issue that we may actually get some research.
Yeah.
But will they find a way to make your autonomic nervous system function properly? I don't know.
Yeah. There's so many medical mysteries out there and things that the medical community doesn't even know about yet that hopefully one day we will learn more and science will persevere in finding out diagnoses and cures, etc. So hopefully we'll see that. And that's lovely advice that you would give to someone, to be kind and gentle to yourself. And the self-talk, positive self-talk is what
hard. It's hard when your mind is willing and your body just says, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. And I love that you said, I Google responsibly. I feel like that's a bumper sticker. Something.
Thank you. That's what I want to tell the doctors too. I'm like, I've not been intelligent and I'm weighing factual data to, just anecdotes from people that have it and putting everything together into a big picture. But generally doctors don't even give you the time to explain that. You're given 15 minutes and you got to go in with your symptoms. I started a telehealth call with the neurologist. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have it planned. I'm going to be as likable as I can be because doctors don't like me. I'm going to show my upbeat personality. Oh, yeah. I just feel like doctors think, they see me coming in and they're like, oh.
Oh, hold on, Laura. I lost your sound again. Oh, yeah. Okay. Go back like 15 seconds.
I went to the neurologist on a telehealth visit, which was all they were offering at the time. And I had my concise list of 21 symptoms that are all super important. And I feel like maybe a doctor can take 5 or 6 of those, put them together and say, yeah, it is Ehlers-Danlos or whatever. So I'm trying to be concise in what I estimate is going to be a 15-minute telehealth appointment. And I could literally sense the doctor tapping her foot like, and she literally said, will you just tell me what your worst symptom is? And I said, I don't think that quickly when you ask me questions. And I made a list because I feel like all of these are important. Well, you just tell me what your top 3 are, which is probably a reasonable question from a doctor, but not when everything's broken. So I read what was at the top of the list because I don't think quickly enough to go, oh God, these are the most important, blah, blah, blah. And I mentioned the, cold feeling like water's running down my leg. And she was like, okay, well, we'll do a small fiber neuropathy test. But she was very quick to tell me, even though I had asked 3 different times before I set the appointment, do you guys treat POTS? I was told that absolutely all of our neurologists treat POTS. One of the first things she said on the phone call was, nobody up here treats POTS. Major
Interesting.
city, major
Wow.
neurology department. And I said, I don't understand. So we spent a lot of time trying to clear up that. She goes, we have broached dysautonomia, which is a term that I haven't used, but POTS is a type of dysautonomia. And that's the malfunction of your autonomic nervous system. There are all kinds of other failures of your autonomic nervous system. POTS is just one of them. There are like 6 or 8 different kinds of POTS. Mine's hyperadrenergic. Just a lot of little layers to go through. But she
So that's
argued
the umbrella.
POTS is the subdiagnosis from what I understand. And she argued with me on the phone that POTS and dysautonomia weren't the same thing. And I thought, is this really the doctor for me? She's not even clear of how it's set up. And she said, you need a cardiologist. It's a heart problem. I hear that a lot. I tried to sign up for physical therapy. And I asked, this was brand new POTS girl. I didn't know anything. I was like, I have seen your ads on Facebook. You guys are amazing. I love your whole vibe. I want to come do physical therapy with you. Do you treat patients with POTS? She flat turned me down because she said, we don't have any measuring equipment or anything for people with heart problems. And I said, well, that's great because POTS isn't a heart problem, autonomic nervous system. And they turned me down. They would not take me for physical therapy because they perceive I had a heart problem. If anybody wants to join me in enlightening their doctor or their local hospital or whatever, I am going to make little small printouts. And I just think about poor me, how sick I am and how nobody would help me. And I just felt so helpless. And anywhere along this chain of 20 some doctors, any single person, 2 neurologists, any one of these doctors could have said, oh, well, you have POTS. The typical time to a POTS diagnosis is 3 years. Mine was a lot longer. But I think it was because that doctor branded me as having psychological. I really do. And I can't prove that, obviously, but I think that she branded me.
That's so frustrating and disappointing, to say the least. And it sometimes, in some ways, lots of ways, makes you lose faith in the medical community, which is why you have to keep pushing. So, Laura, thank you so much for your time. And I do hope that other people listening to this podcast who have similar symptoms will consider that this could be a diagnosis for them, or at least one to pursue, to at least check the box or put the red line through the list that, okay, it is this or it isn't that, but at least it's a direction potentially. So I do thank you for everything. And maybe you'll come back and follow up with our listeners and let us know what has happened and next steps for you. And hopefully it's good things and you're getting more answers. So thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. And definitely if I can find some good news, I want to share it.
Thank you so much.